Hello. Here's another video on a little topic. Again, just trying to get things cleared up for a lot of people that ask me questions on stuff. This is another verse that tends to throw people. I have it highlighted. It's in Matthew 6, specifically in verse 3. And you got to kind of go through this whole thing here. But the verse that throws people, because they apply the scriptures to their own body and not realizing that this is kind of talking about government in general, the kingdom government, not human civil government. But what gets them is, but when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Now, a lot of people think that that's talking about their literal left hand. Don't let this left hand know what this right hand is doing. Well, it's just one brain controlling this, both my right and left hand. So how can my left hand not know what my right hand is doing? It's a ridiculous on its face to make this assumption that what's really being spoken about here is about the body, the kingdom body, and the form of government that he wants us to live under. That's his form of government. So if we back up, we'll kind of see a little bit of clarification, and then we'll kind of go into detail. So it's teaching about giving to the needy. Now, remember, I've had a few conversations, I think in some of the comments of the videos that I've posted recently, even on YouTube. Not everybody let's look at the civil government. Is everybody that's a 14th Amendment U.S. citizen a government paid employee? No, of course not. Not everybody is a government bureaucrat working for a various government agency, whether that's at the local, county, state, or federal level, right? Most people in the United States are not government employees. They work in commerce as employees for other entities, not directly for a government agency, right? So the kingdom of God is very similar. The Levites, which is kind of what we're familiar with, or the ministers, the apostles in the New Testament, they were the actual government bureaucrats, okay? That's the left hand. The right hand are all the other people. So what this is talking about, we'll see it here. It'll start to make sense now if we understand it in that perspective. So watch out. Don't do your good deeds. Now this is talking to right-handed people, not the Levites, not the ministers, not the apostles. Here's my right hand. Remember, it says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Okay? So the right hand is one aspect of the government. The left hand is the other. Okay, so the left hand are the ministers, the Levites, the apostles. The right hand is everybody else. What's their role in the government? What's the role of the ministers in the government? We each have our own separate roles. Okay, so watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. This is where it gets a little more specific. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues, churches, temples, whatever, government buildings, and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. Okay? So, again, blowing trumpets in the synagogues. Remember, I just said the left hand represents the ministers, the Levites, the apostles, the left hand of government. Where do these right-handers doing charity work blow their trumpets? Before the ministers. Hey, look what I did. I did your job. I'm doing what you guys do. Reward me. Tell me how good I am. No, 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 no. The left hand does its job, and they don't tell you what it's doing. And you right-handers, you do your stuff, and you don't tell the left hand what you're doing. Don't make a big deal of it. Okay? Now, why am I saying this is part of the government? This is how it works. Okay? So now we're going to get in. I'll share this link in the description. I'll try to remember. This is from a very good book by a friend of mine, or used to be a friend. I haven't seen him or talked to him for a long time. Greg Williams. He wrote this book called Thy Kingdom Comes, and it's a great book. And in it, here, I'm in chapter 9, Temples and Churches, specifically in part 4 of that book. It's called The Arts of the Temples. Now, these temples are government buildings. We tend to miss that in modern times. But temples are where you went for your Social Security, your benefits, anytime you were in need. You were a member of a temple, you signed up, and then you paid offerings into that. Kind of sounds like a Social Security tax that entitles you to a benefit at some later date, right? So these temples were like government buildings, and in many cases they were administered by the government through the bureaucrats of the government called ministers. In several countries, we still use that term, the Ministry of Defense, sort of thing. And, Great Britain the United Kingdom has these different ministers, and lots of different countries use those terms for government officials and government bureaucrats. So that's taking from this old tradition, okay? So I'm going to read some of this for you. In the Gospels, we see the mother of Zebedee's children requesting 2 offices for her sons in the kingdom preached by Christ. She desired the left and the right-handed seats on either side of the king for her sons. She knew Jesus was high priest and king. Jesus knew he had come to be the king who restored every man to his family and every man to his possession. Now that's citing Leviticus 25 from the Jubilee description. So here's Leviticus 25, and you'll see, and ye shall hallow the 50th year, and this is actually on the American Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possession, and ye shall return every man unto his family, setting the captive free again, giving him dominion over his property and over his family that has been bound up into these civil law or any contractual agreements. Okay? So, that's what Jesus was doing. He was coming to restore the kingdom the rightful way, where the right hand of government was to return to the people according to God's plan. This is the way it's always been. Greg's just done a good job of citing this out and making it clear to people. And I don't need to rewrite, I don't need to redo the wheel, to reinvent the wheel. Somebody else has already done it. So this is good. This would make the people stronger. It's about taking back your responsibilities. Rights follow responsibilities. If you don't perform on your responsibility, you lose access to the right. So people talk about their God-given rights. Well, are you performing on your God-given responsibilities? And for most civilians, the answer is absolutely not. You've surrendered that responsibility over to the government to do for you, and then you bitch, moan, and complain when the government takes the rights from you. So when you taking back your God-given responsibility would return their God-given rights, making men whole again. But when thou doest alms, charity, giving, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. Matthew 6:3. The right hand of government was called the imperium by the Romans. Now, they didn't have everything wrong. They got this right. The right hand of government before these Caesars before the kings became imperators and all this power was centralized in the government, Rome was a republic where the right hands, the Roman people, were the imperium. It wasn't invested in the government yet. It was divided into, now this is the way the Romans did it, they divided it into the merum, which dealt with foreign aggression, which think of, we've done this too, who is it that, and biblically this is correct, who is it that goes and fights the wars? Do the Levites fight? Did Aaron fight? Did Moses fight? Or were they the ones holding up the rod while the people, the right hands, were out fighting? Right? So the militia, the Minutemen, and I just recently learned what the difference is. That's an interesting story because I've got 6 relatives that were from the American Revolution. Minutemen were the average guy that just came out with his gun and defended the community. The militiaman was somebody who was paid to be in service under the federal army. So most people today that are armed that would just come out and defend their community would actually be Minutemen, not militia. Now, a Minuteman could become militia if he stuck around and started getting a commission or a paycheck and was recruited or called up into the militia. I thought that was interesting, but that's how we originally did it. So we were still doing this system of right hands where every able-bodied male with a gun in good working order would come out and defend his community. So that was a Minuteman. Okay, which dealt with foreign aggression. Okay, so if the United States or America, the landmass of America, was invaded, then most Americans would step up and fight. That's a right-handed government responsibility, not a left-handed government responsibility. Okay, and the mixtum, which dealt with the wicked within the jurisdiction of the civil state. So this is dealing with, unrighteousness, criminals within the local jurisdiction. This is our jury of 12. Again, so this right hand kind of takes most of this government executive power to administer, these kind of powers is what's left in the hands of the people. It's their responsibility to reckon the wicked, to bring, to be judges and that sort of thing. And the Bible talks about this. Ye are all gods. The judges at the gate, the gods, the Elohim at your gates, these elders who serve as judges. These are the right hands. They're not the Levites. They're not the priests. They're not the apostles. They're right hand. They're the right hand of government. Don't let the right hand or the left hand know what the right hand's doing. And specifically when you're doing charity, which is the left hand's job. Okay, that's their principal job. Okay? So we'll get more in it. So the wicked within the jurisdiction of the civil state. So local criminals. These powers were granted by the people to the province of the patronus. Again, now you see this slipping away. They're no longer doing it for themselves, letting go of their responsibilities, investing that responsibility into the patronus, our father, the head of the state, the king or the president or whatever, or the executive power of Rome. Under his patronage and tutorship, as the people registered their children, the power of the state grew. The temples were a part of the left hand of government and originally depended upon, let me scroll this up a little bit, and originally depended upon the free will and sin offerings of the people. The ancient altars of clay meaning Adamah, these are altars of stone, altars of clay. Altars of clay are people, so are altars of stone. Stones are just elders. What does it take to make clay into hard rock? Pressure and time. So as we live through the pressures of life and time, as we age, we become more wise sages. And those are altars of stone Those are the judges, the elders that understand things and know things better because of living life and can have empathy and understanding for all of this and judge rightly according to the law of God. So the ancient altars of clay were formed of, by, and for the people to the benefit of their neighbors in charity and love. This is what we call the ministers who are called out. Who are they called out by? The people. How are they called out by the people? The people see the best foot washers. Who's the best servant that wants to help people in need? That's who you entrust your offerings to, for them to go around and be the left hand offering charity to help people in need. So these are your servant foot washers. They become these altars of clay, who are also the servants in the temple when they build a temple or church, whatever. Okay? The wealth of the system was stored in brotherhood and love through charity. Everybody kept their own wealth. They would give it as charity to these ministers who are the left hand to take care of who? Primarily, they took care of those without a family, widows and orphans. If you have a family, the first place you go to for help is your family. You go to that right hand and ask the patriarch or your father who, is there to help you. So if you get a need, you go to your family first. Well, what about those people that don't have a family? They go to the ministers. The altars of clay they're the ones that, and God talks about this in his word over and over again. The Levites and the ministers take care of the widows and orphans first. That's their first role and job. In service in the name of Yahuwah, because we are to love each other, right? So he answereth and saith unto them, He hath 2 coats, let him impart to him that hath none. And he that hath meat, let him do likewise. Luke 3:11. Right? John the Baptist is telling us the very simple premise of what we're to do. If you see, you don't have to rely just strictly on these altars of clay. You can give charity directly. That's what the whole theme of this is right here, teaching about giving to the needy. Watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues, telling the left hand what you just did. I'm over here doing your job. I'm a good minister. Da-da-da-da-da. In the streets to call attention to their acts. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand, don't let the ministers, you don't have to go blasting around to the synagogues or the churches or whatever, telling these servants of the left hand that you're out there doing their job. Just keep it to yourself. God knows what you're doing. You're helping somebody with giving them a coat or meat or whatever it is they need. So you're bypassing the left hand. So when you bypass the altar of clay because you see the immediate need, just do it. Don't go blathering about to these guys that you just did a bunch of good stuff. Just do it. So the right hands can perform charity and the left hand performs charity, and neither one of them needs to know what the other one's doing. Now, we do, but that's more of, we want to make sure these ministers that we're giving our offerings to, they got to report to us, not the other way around. The right hand, don't go telling the left hand what you're doing. The left hand, however, because they're being entrusted with your offerings, they should tell you what they're doing. And that's going to be, you're going to see it. In a small community, you should see it. You're going to see them helping, Bertha the widow. You're going to see them helping, Chad the orphan. That's going to just be seen. So you'll know them by their fruit, by what they're doing. That's why you're giving to them anyway. So the national treasure of the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God, is in the hearts of the people. You keep your wealth to you, and you give as you need to people directly, the right hand giving. Don't tell the left hand what you're doing. Or you give to the left hands, and they use what you've been given for God's purposes to help the needy. Either way, everybody gets taken care of who's in need. And it's all done because we love our neighbors as much as we love ourselves. Charity and hope beyond the family into the community and nation will maintain freedom under God, at home and abroad. As the right hand of man is freely given in the service of justice to our fellow man, so also the left hand serves their same need. Both elements of society gain God's grace and are virtuously strengthened by such brotherhood. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. Matthew 6:3. Jesus also knew the king was not to appoint these offices from the top down. God would determine who would hold these offices, and he would reveal it through the people in their pattern of tens, hundreds, and thousands, choosing servants of servants unto the highest servant. So what's basically being said here is when I see somebody who's being a good foot washer, a good servant, I'm going to elect them because of their fruit. I'm going to elect them with my offerings to be a minister. I'm calling them out as a minister. And I'm giving my tithes and offerings to that minister who I see directly helping those in need. That becomes the left hand. But I'm a right hand. I can still, if I see somebody directly in need, I don't have to go and tell him, hey, I saw somebody in need, go take care of them. No. I just do it. And when I do that, I don't let my left hand, the minister, the altar of clay that I've seen and chosen, called out with my offerings, I don't tell him what I did. God sees what I did. And I'm happy with that. I don't need to boast. I don't need to tell everybody, oh, and I especially don't need to tell this left hand. Does this start to make sense now? This is talking about the kingdom structure. Okay? And every day in the kingdom is election day. You don't have to keep that altar of clay, that left hand. If he doesn't do a very good job, if he starts to get lazy and slothful, well, don't give him any more offerings. Don't give him any more tithes. Find somebody else who's on fire in the spirit to serve people and give them. And now you've got a different left hand. This is the pattern of tens, hundreds, and thousands. And I'll get into this a little more, but I think I'll just draw a quick picture here on a piece of scrap paper. Okay? We see this in the Old Testament. Let's see if I can do this here. I don't know if I'll be able to or not. One elder heads a family. Okay? So now let's put 10 of these. Let me try to hold this here. We'll draw a few more circles. Each one's representing a family, and specifically the head of that family, the oldest living male, and his wife becomes the kind of the prince and princess of the family, the elder, the patriarch and matriarch, whatever you want to call it, the Abraham and the Sarah sort of thing. So we got the 8, okay, so 9 and 10. Okay, so each one of these represents a family. And this falls into that assembly versus associate. Okay, each one of these are distinct families. And they are themselves their own unique unit under God. They're a body. So this family, with the oldest living patriarch and matriarch, they could have lots of children under here. Could be a small family, could be a big family, right? Okay. Now I'll get into more detail about this, but these, let's say with these 10, one of these guys is a really service-oriented individual. This guy's fruit, you see him all the time helping others at his own expense. He's willing to lay down his life, the things he needs to do to serve others first. Okay? Then he goes and does what he needs to do for himself and his own family. So when you see somebody like that, that's the Spirit of God in them. And now these people that are congregating with this guy, these other guys and gals, see this behavior and they call him out. How do they call him out? With their tithes and offerings. So now they give their tithes and offerings to that minister. That's their election. This is what calls this guy out to be a minister, an apostle, whatever. Now, the way the Bible works is this is supposed to be a firstborn son or a son of Levi. In the original program, this was supposed to be a firstborn son. Yeah, I'm kind of writing pretty nasty here because I'm trying to do this and hold this phone and paper and everything at the same time. Okay? Or a Levite after the debacle of the golden calf, right? But we see this. Geez, Scott. That's pretty funny. That's the original plan was supposed to be firstborn sons. And we see this with Abraham or with Isaac and Abraham and Isaac, right? He's willing to sacrifice his son on the altar of God. What does that mean? It doesn't mean to kill him. It means to leave him with a priest to be trained up. If you notice very carefully, Isaac does not return with Abraham. Isaac stays behind after they eat, have this barbecue with the ram. And God has proven Abraham's willingness to give up his firstborn son to God. Isaac stays behind and learns from the Melchizedek, the Melchizedek, the high priest at that time. To learn what? To learn how to become the high priest. To learn how to be this servant minister. The best foot washer. Okay? We see this with Samuel. Remember Samuel's mother, she couldn't have children and she prayed to God and all this, and she was married to an Ephraimite, not a Levite, but she made the promise to God if she could get pregnant and give birth to a son, she'd give her son to God. And she did it. She followed through. So this Ephraimite, who's a firstborn son, Ephraim is the birthright tribe, she gives her firstborn of the tribe of Ephraim over to Eli to be trained up in the temple, probably about when he was 8 or 9 years old, to learn how to be a good servant foot washer. Okay, so it's supposed to be a firstborn son without spot or blemish. If you don't sacrifice them, you have to buy those back. All the firstborn of the flocks and herds you give without spot or blemish. But remember, because of the golden calf, we have Levites, but in the millennial reign, a certain clan within the Levites are going to be the only ones called Zadokite priests because they never went astray. Most of the Levites also went astray. So I think in the millennial reign, it's going to return to the firstborn sons with the Zadokite Levite priests, and those are going to be the left hand in the millennial kingdom while the rest of us are right hands. But remember, when you give to somebody in need as a right hand, don't let your left hand, don't let this minister know what you're doing, what your right hand is doing. That's the way the kingdom functions with this left hand and right hand. Okay? So now you give all these guys, see that this is the best foot washer. They give their tithes and offerings to him. That calls him out to be this servant minister. Now, this is technically also supposed to be somebody that's not connected to the world. It should be somebody that doesn't have a birth certificate, social security number, that's under God alone and not under some other God, sovereign power, mighty authority with all these quasi-adhesion contracts. That's kind of difficult to do now. There are people like that. I'm myself one of these guys. I'm a firstborn son, but I have spots and defects. So I have had lots of broken bones. So I technically cannot be given over to God, but firstborn sons have this blessing. And I prayed for a blessing of this sevenfold spirits in Isaiah. I think Isaiah chapter 11, I think it is. And I was foolishness to ask God for the spirits of wisdom and understanding. And he blessed me with that. And, you can look at that as either a blessing or a curse. Sometimes it's a curse. But he answered that prayer, and now I got to deal with it. But that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because he did bless me with wisdom and understanding. So I am a firstborn son, but I can't be, I can serve in this capacity, but I'm in this time before the millennial reign. But I have blemishes. I have broken bones. I don't see very well out of my left eye, that sort of thing. And that kind of, maybe after I'm transfigured, I might be one of these. But right now I'm standing in a substitute because we don't have many of these. So there are some of us out here. But even so, there's ways for you to do this. You just got to be careful, and that's for another discussion someday. So that is what this, whoops, let me bring that back if I can. So that's kind of what this is really talking about. I know a lot of people, this kind of throws people, this left hand and your right hand. This is talking about the government. The left hand, the ministers. The right hand, the rest of the people of the nation of Israel, God's holy people. Okay? You have, the right hand has specific jobs to do as far as the government goes, and the left hand has specific jobs to do in the government, as the Torah describes, and we see in other cultures outside of Israel when they're doing naturally what is in the natural and the common law of man that comes from God's law. We saw it in early Rome in a republic. We saw it in early America. Remember, when did Social Security come into play? It wasn't until the 40s. When did public schools start to come into play? It wasn't until the late 1800s that you started to see public school. I think Boston School District in the United States was the first public school district, and that wasn't until like the 1880s, I think, if I remember right, somewhere in there. When did like aid to women, infants, and children come into play? Food stamps and all these welfare programs. That wasn't until the 1960s. You see, we start to surrender our responsibilities of caring for our neighbor over to, it really happens this way. If we say, I'm selfish and I just want to do my own thing, to hell with everybody else. Well, somebody's got to do that. Somebody's got to help people in need. And if you don't do it, if you don't play your part as a right hand, well, then the left hand steps up and also becomes the right hand. And that's basically what happened. When the people stopped taking part in their responsibilities, then this, of course, in God's kingdom, the system's kind of reversed. We create powerful offices of the right hand, and we're supposed to be the left hand. In America, that was early America. It was all done through charity, while the government was kind of taking the right-handed stuff, the power of raising armies and that sort of thing, and judging and all that. We kind of flipped it because we're kind of doing a civil law thing. But in the kingdom, the right hand is supposed to be the judging and the armies and the defense and education and all that was kind of over here. And the charity was left to the ministers that we called out. Levites, firstborn sons, or those we call out because now they're good bushwashers. In this interim, that's what we're looking for. It doesn't matter if you're a firstborn son or a Levite at this time, because we're still waiting for that millennial kingdom to start. So anybody that's called out that's a good bushwasher, you entrust them with your offerings to do this service for widows and orphans and the families in need if they have something that they can't take care of, right? So we'll go into more detail about that as I make new videos, but I thought this was a good one that I should touch on right here because a lot of people don't understand what that means. Hey, thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.